For centuries, Africa has been portrayed as an extremely primitive land, awaiting the enlightening influence of Western civilization, with religion merely introduced by whites to blacks. But what if this is a colossal distortion of history? What if the cradle of civilization and the birthplace of monotheism were not the fertile crescents of the East, but the verdant heart of Africa? Join us today as we challenge the accepted chronology and unearth suppressed knowledge. The black presence in the Bible is undeniable, stretching from its very beginning to the present day. The African was not a heathen before the arrival of Arabs or Europeans. Contrary to popular belief, the concept of monotheism actually originated in Africa, and black people were its earliest adherents. For instance, the Star of David, a symbol intrinsically linked to Judaism, has historical roots that extend far beyond its modern connotations, pointing towards the black civilization of ancient Egypt. Specifically, it is etched onto a temple at Elephantine, a region bordering what was once North Sudan. This design, featuring two interlocking triangles, represents a profound concept: the unification of the celestial and terrestrial realms. It mirrors the core African philosophy of Ma'at, which posits a harmonious correspondence between heaven and earth. While its connection to Jewish communities deepened during the Middle Ages, the Star of David gained widespread recognition as a Jewish emblem in the 19th century. This coincided with the rise of Jewish nationalism and the Zionist movement, which solidified its status as a powerful symbol for Jewish identity and aspirations. Zionism is an ethno-cultural nationalist movement that emerged in Europe in the late 19th century and aimed for the establishment of a Jewish state through the colonization of a land outside of Europe. Although the Star of David had been a feature of Jewish symbolism for centuries, its prominence rose dramatically during the Zionist era. Adopted as a powerful emblem of Jewish unity and national identity, it culminated in its placement on the flag of Israel in 1948, cementing its iconic status worldwide. Often regarded as the progenitor of the world's major monotheistic faiths, Judaism differs from Christianity and Islam in its less active approach to spreading its beliefs. But although quite popular, many do not know, or simply cannot believe, that similar practices were already present in ancient African civilizations way back. Ancient Egyptians revered a single supreme being called Iman, also known as Amen. This civilization practiced circumcision and considered their written language a divine script, a reflection of the Creator's will. Now, if you think about it, who were the original Semites, and where did the term originally come from? Were Africans really pagans before the rise of Abrahamic faiths? Paganism refers to a broad range of religious beliefs and practices that existed before the rise of Abrahamic religions like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. These religions are typically polytheistic, meaning they worship multiple gods and goddesses, and animistic, believing that natural objects, places, and creatures possess spiritual essence. Pagan religions often have a strong connection to nature, with rituals and deities that reflect the natural world, such as the sun, moon, earth, and various animals. These traditions were common in many cultures around the world before the spread of monotheistic religions. Meanwhile, unlike paganism, revealed religions are believed to come directly from a divine source. Judaism is often seen as one of the first revealed religions, claiming a direct link to God from the beginning of time. This sets Judaism apart as the religion of a chosen people, tasked with sharing God's message. This special status is central to Judaism and unfolds in three main stages: the covenant with Abraham, marked by circumcision, the giving of the law through Moses, and ongoing divine guidance through prophets. Evidence suggests that ideas like monotheism and practices like circumcision existed in Africa way before Judaism. Cheikh Anta Diop's Nations Negres et Culture suggests that monotheistic concepts existed in Egypt and Sudan before Judaism. The African deity Iman, often depicted in various forms including male and androgynous representations, supports the idea of a single supreme being rather than a pantheon of gods typical of polytheistic beliefs. Now, if that is the case, why do people depict most ancient black civilizations in Africa and Egypt as polytheistic? One theory suggests that the portrayal of ancient Egypt as polytheistic might be a Western and Semitic bias to align with Abrahamic narratives. Nevertheless, circumcision, a practice later incorporated into Abrahamic traditions, dates back to ancient Egypt, long before the arrival of the Semites. The tomb of Ankh-Mahor provides evidence of this, dating back to around 2345 BCE. While hieroglyph is a Greek term meaning sacred writing, the Egyptians called these symbols medu, or words of God. This also shows a belief in divine communication predating Judaism. In African traditions, Iman communicates indirectly through nature. Understanding these messages required a scientific approach, reflected in the natural elements incorporated into hieroglyphs. At this point, it's really safe to say that the seeds of monotheism were sown long before Abraham. Evidence of belief in a singular, omnipotent deity can be traced back to ancient Egyptian texts like the Pyramid of Unas. Judaism, however, emerged alongside Semitic cultures. With this, we go back to our previous question. Who were the original Semites, and where did the term originally come from? The term Semitic comes from Shem, a biblical figure believed to be the ancestor of various Semites, such as the Hebrews, Arabs, and related groups. Western scholars coined these terms based on biblical accounts to classify peoples primarily from Mesopotamia or present-day Iraq, linking their mythical heritage to Abraham. The earliest Semitic groups formed from the blend of Sumerians, early settlers of Mesopotamia with darker skin, and nomadic warlike tribes from northern Eurasia. So who were these established communities of dark-skinned people with deep African cultural roots? These communities included the Persian archers, whose ancestry links back to the Elamites, the earliest civilizers of Iran. An example of a Persian archer is depicted in the Louvre Museum. The Sumerians, also known as Zalmat Gagadu, or people of black heads. Additionally, the Canaanites, the Phoenicians, and the ancient people of Kemet, now commonly called Egyptians, are renowned as foundational civilizations. A typical Egyptian depiction can be seen in the tomb of Ramesses III, with the authentic African name Ramu Heyunu, dating back to 1200 BCE. From this rich blend of cultures emerged the Akkadians, led by Sargon of Akkad, whose empire rose around 2300 BCE, marking the beginning of recorded Semitic history. This era unfolded approximately 3 centuries after the construction of the Great Pyramids. Nomadic by nature, these early Semitic populations dispersed across the Near East. The Fertile Crescent, spanning Mesopotamia to Egypt, became a central area for Semitic migrations and settlements. This region is steeped in historical and biblical stories. The Bible portrays Abraham as a nomadic Semitic who migrated from Mesopotamia to Canaan. However, the Semitic peoples were a diverse group with varying origins and experiences. Their interactions with ancient civilizations in Sumer, Canaan, and Egypt, regions heavily influenced by African cultures, cannot be overlooked. The Bible describes Semitic migrations into Canaan, a land already inhabited by indigenous black Canaanites with deep roots in Egypt. While some Semitic nomads settled in Canaan, others migrated to Egypt, a major African power center of the time. The ancient Near East, influenced heavily by Egypt, was home to interactions between Africans and Semitic newcomers. Egyptian texts often grouped various Semitic peoples under the term Asians, a broad classification rather than a specific ethnic label. The term Asia itself originates from an ancient Egyptian word meaning east, indicating the geographical origin of these Semitic groups. These Eastern groups, or Asians, were known by different names such as Amu, Shasu, Heakasut, and Habiru. The Egyptians were familiar with these groups, including their reputation as nomadic raiders who plagued the region. Egypt often intervened to counter their activities, particularly in Canaan. Interestingly, early Semitic groups were primarily polytheistic. Their introduction to monotheism often occurred through interactions with African communities like the Canaanites and Egyptians. A notable example is Melchizedek, a Canaanite king and priest of the Most High God, who welcomed Abram, later Abraham, with bread and wine. This suggests that the African Canaanites, similar to their counterparts in the Nile Valley, practiced monotheism before Abram, who is often regarded as the first monotheist in Semitic traditions, arrived. Essentially, the Bible inadvertently indicates that monotheism was already present among African peoples when Abram came into their lands. The biblical accounts of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph reveal the cultural exchange between Semitic nomads and African civilizations, particularly the Canaanites and Egyptians. These narratives reveal how Semitic peoples adopted monotheistic beliefs and other cultural practices from these more advanced societies, showing the profound influence of African cultures on the development of Semitic religions and customs. Initially, Hebrews referred to a small group including Abraham, Jacob, and their families, rather than a distinct people. Contrary to popular belief, these patriarchs and their kin were not enslaved in Egypt. The concept of a Hebrew people developed over time. While biblical narratives describe the Hebrews, historical evidence suggests the term Hebrew likely originated from Habiru or Apiru, derogatory terms for nomadic Semitic groups found in Egyptian and Canaanite texts. These terms did not denote a specific group of people or language. The biblical story of Exodus, detailing the Hebrews' escape from Egyptian slavery, lacks concrete historical evidence. Cheikh Anta Diop offers a potential explanation in his work, Nations Negres et Culture. He suggests that the biblical figure of Moses may correspond to a period around 1400 BC, during the reign of Pharaoh Akhenaten. Akhenaten's monotheistic reforms aimed at unifying Egypt's empire may have influenced Moses, who is portrayed as passionately embracing monotheism within his community. Now, it's important to note that this context is set during the 18th dynasty, a time of significant Egyptian power and expansion under Pharaoh Thutmose III. During this era, Egypt became a hub for people from its conquered territories who came for work, settlement, or tribute. Diop specifically situates this transformative period during Akhenaten's reign, proposing that the biblical Exodus narrative may have been inspired by the historical interactions and religious reforms of that time. Akhenaten revolutionized Egyptian religious practices by ending the worship of various deities like Osiris, Isis, Hathor, and Anubis, who had traditionally been worshipped through priestly mediation. Instead, he established the monotheistic worship of Aten, the sun disk, as the sole divine entity, with himself as the exclusive worshiper. With that, Akhenaten stands as a singular figure in history, often likened to the first prophet. His radical religious reforms centralized worship around one deity. Unfortunately, Egyptologists and Western scholars, lacking a deep understanding of African culture and spirituality, have misinterpreted these divine manifestations as separate gods. The Bible portrays the Hebrew conquest of Palestine, the Promised Land, as a violent takeover, reminiscent of the brutal tactics employed by the Hyksos and Habiru. Scholars have drawn comparisons between these ancient conquerors and the biblical Hebrews, particularly in their treatment of the Canaanites. The Bible outlines a complete extermination of the Canaanites to facilitate Israelite settlement, as detailed in the book of Joshua. However, historical evidence suggests a more complex and gradual process of Semitic migration and assimilation into Canaanite society. Specifically, historical evidence such as the Merneptah stele from 1207 BC reveals that Egypt maintained control over Canaan well into the period following the 18th dynasty, contradicting the timeline of an immediate post-Exodus conquest. The Semites gradually integrated into Canaanite society, adopting their language and culture. Over time, these Semitic tongues evolved into what we now recognize as Semitic languages. This gradual blending and subsequent independence led to the formation of the kingdoms of Judah and Israel around 1000 BCE. These political entities emerged within a broader context of regional change, marked by the decline of powerful empires like Egypt and the rise of new groups, such as the Sea Peoples, which reshaped the ancient Near East. Judaism and its foundational texts arose in response to a period of political conflict, serving to unify a people with shared roots, beliefs, and laws. The Assyrian and Babylonian empires, capitalizing on the weakened Pharaonic Empire, conquered the Canaanite region, including the Semitic kingdoms of Israel and Judah in 722 BC and 587 BC respectively. This led to the forced exile of the Semitic people, giving rise to the legend of the lost tribes of Israel. Upon their eventual return to Canaan, these communities endeavored to rebuild their nations and cultural identity. The establishment of Judaism as a unifying faith and the subsequent creation of sacred scriptures were instrumental in the rebuilding of the nation. The Hebrew Bible, or Tanakh, compiled during this period, served as a cornerstone of the people's history, laws, and religious tenets. By introducing concepts like the chosen people and the people of God, these texts fostered a strong sense of national identity. Ezra, a revered scribe, is often credited with much of the biblical compilation. Upon returning from exile, the community began to identify as Jews. Originally, Jew referred to inhabitants of Judea, a region of Canaan. While the Canaanites were the earliest settlers, it was the subsequent influx of Semitic populations that led to the Jewish identity. A history marked by nomadic life and foreign domination fostered the concept of a Messiah, a leader who would establish a powerful, independent nation. Biblical narratives of kingdoms under David and Solomon exemplify this aspiration. However, the reality was a series of small, vulnerable states, ultimately succumbing to Babylonian, Persian, Greek, and Roman rule. The biblical promise of a divinely granted independent homeland stands in contrast to the Jews' historical reality of coexistence with diverse peoples and recurrent conquest. The Hebrew Bible itself chronicles this ongoing struggle, from the epic tale of David and Goliath to countless other conflicts. While biblical narratives evoke images of powerful Jewish kingdoms under David and Solomon, historical evidence suggests a more complex reality. These grand monarchies were often idealized representations of a desired national destiny rather than accurate historical accounts. Historical records, including biblical accounts such as the stories of Abraham and Hagar and Joseph, reveal extensive interactions between Semitic nomads and African populations like the Canaanites and Egyptians. Over time, these exchanges resulted in cultural and even genetic intermingling. Despite this, these Semitic groups preserved a strong sense of Mesopotamian identity, distinguishing themselves from their African neighbors. Conversely, African societies viewed these Semites as outsiders with Asian origins. The physical appearance of Semitic peoples evolved over time through interactions with Canaanites, Egyptians, and subsequent invasions by lighter-skinned groups like the Sea Peoples, Philistines, and Greco-Romans. These foreign populations arrived during periods of decline for Canaanite and Egyptian civilizations. The resulting intermingling gradually shifted the physical attributes of the Semitic population towards lighter skin tones, a characteristic more prevalent among their modern descendants. Meanwhile, the Jewish identity of Ethiopian Jews, or Falashas, remains a subject of scholarly debate. Ethiopia's connection to Judaism is often linked to the legendary tale of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, though historical evidence for a romantic relationship between the two is lacking. Theories about the origins of Ethiopian Jews vary. Some scholars propose a lineage tracing back to ancient Egyptians who followed the monotheistic worship of Aten, suggesting a link to early Judaism. Others argue for a later conversion to Judaism. Genetic studies, however, indicate a primarily Ethiopian ancestry. While cultural exchange and religious influences have shaped societies worldwide, the core identity of African communities, including their monotheistic beliefs centered on Imana, remains deeply rooted in the continent. With all of these said, the pervasive Western stereotype of ancient Africans as mere idol worshippers is inaccurate. A more nuanced understanding reveals quite a sophisticated theological framework. The intricate cosmos, teeming with life, reflects the divine architect's boundless creativity and multifaceted nature. This divine complexity is expressed through various roles: the supreme creator, the cosmic ruler, the nurturing parent, the eternal sovereign, the embodiment of power, love, truth, and justice. These manifestations, often understood as deities, are not separate entities, but facets of a single supreme being. This concept of a divine being with both masculine and feminine aspects is evident in the depiction of deities like Osiris and Isis. Rather than direct worship of an unknowable supreme being, ancient Africans honored these divine manifestations through rituals and temples. Truly, this practice reflects a profound understanding of the divine as a multifaceted, incomprehensible force. The term Amun, meaning the hidden one, encapsulates this concept of a supreme, unknowable deity whose essence is revealed through its various manifestations. Now, as we peel back the layers of history, we uncover a story rich with complexity and wonder, one that challenges us to rethink what we truly know about our shared past. The cradle of civilization, and the essence of monotheism are deeply intertwined with African cultures and traditions. And from these ancient roots, the undeniable presence of blackness within the Bible emerges as a radiant, undeniable truth. Thank you for joining us on this journey through complex and often misunderstood history. If you found value in this exploration, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for similar discussions. Share your thoughts and questions in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep seeking the truth and expanding your understanding of the world.